to the webinar, 7 Emerging Trends, Reshaping Leadership Development, presented by Monica Bortoluzzi and Clemson Turagano, the Center for Creative Leadership, who will share the latest trends, disruptions, and challenges in leadership development and how organizations are responding. Again, my name is Tracy Dobbins, and I'm your host for today. If you're just getting to know us, CCL is the top 10 ranked provider of executive education globally. We work with 2/3 of the world's top 500 companies, small business and government, providing innovative solutions for the entire organization and programs proven to transform the individual. Our work is based on significant research from our own elite teams to the finest global sources, and we share it readily with you today in this discussion. Before our presenters begin, please know that we love participation and invite you to use the chat tool provided on the right side of your screen to ask questions or interact with the presenters. Simply direct it to all participants. A more formal question and answer session will be held at the end of the webinar, so feel free to send your questions in. Finally, look to tomorrow for a link to the recorded version of today's webinar and other related leadership resources. With the details behind us, I'd like to welcome our presenters. Monica is the Client Solutions Director, Southern Europe region at the Center for Creative Leadership. She is an experienced facilitator and executive coach who works with leaders across different industries and geographies. Monica partners with her clients to support them addressing the leadership systemic side of their business challenges. Clemson is the Global Director of Custom Solutions at the Center for Creative Leadership. His broad span of clients includes numerous commercial, public, and non-government agencies, offering a variety of leadership development, virtual learning, and coaching programs. His C-suite work includes commercial leaders as well as elected and appointed senior government officials across the spectrum of foreign relations, defense, education, intelligence, and humanitarian aid. Clemson is responsible for the custom spectrum of CCL's leadership portfolio. Welcome, Monica and Clemson. Now I'd like to turn it over to Monica.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. I'm Monica, and I'm speaking with you from our campus in Brussels, the capital of Europe, Belgium.
And I'm Clemson Turagano, joining you from our corporate headquarters in Greensboro, North Carolina, USA. Welcome.
We want to welcome our global audience today. It looks like we have people from all over the world joining us. Yeah, absolutely. Very exciting. There are people from Australia, China, India, Japan, Philippines, Poland, Togo, UK, just to name a few. And this is truly excellent because our new trends report addresses emerging trends that are important to all leaders and organizations around the globe. So in this webinar, we'll walk you through some high-level takeaways from the report, which reflects findings from our leading insights research community. So this panel includes thousands of leaders and influencers in the leadership development field across many different sectors and industries.
Yeah, Monica, that's why I really enjoy using this type of research from our Leading Insights research community. It's real-world, real-time information reflecting the challenges that leaders face today across that wide range of organizations. And it doesn't matter if you're a for-profit business or a nonprofit, government sector, doesn't matter. These 7 trends affect you.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And today we are all working in a new reality, so with new challenges. Clients, they talk to us about robot automation, artificial intelligence, digitalization, e-commerce, and massive cultural shifts and changing geopolitical dynamics as well. So our work and our work as well, they are in a state of perpetual change. And all these factors are pushing us to innovate, to think and do business differently. Therefore, organizations and leaders are feeling the challenge of developing today's leaders to meet tomorrow's demands. So leaders who think about and pay attention to these trends and how to address them, they will be more successful.
Oh, yeah, and for our friends who are in the webinar with us, for the next 45 minutes, we want to review these 7 trends, where they came from and what they mean. But, you know, even more importantly, for CCL, we want to deliver results that matter. So we'll share some specific strategies that you can use to respond to these 7 emerging trends at your organization.
Absolutely. Thank you, Clemson. And yes, we have identified 7 key trends for today's leaders. So today, we are going to talk more about each one of these trends over the next 45 minutes or so. After that, we will be able to take some questions and answers, of course. So the first 4 trends we'll discuss are, and you can see them already on screen, accidental leaders, change endurance, digital fluency, embracing disruption.
And the final 3 are kicking glass, which has to do with women's leadership, reimagined reviews, which is something we're all very interested in, where we'll look at feedback and performance management, and finally, tying all of these together, the importance of your organizational culture, how it might be rebooted and transformed. So keep that culture idea in the back of your mind as we go through all of these trends.
Okay, so I think it's time to get going. And what do you think, Clemson? Would you take the first one to start with?
Oh yeah, this is one of my favorites, accidental leaders. And this is the first trend, and it's familiar to many of us on the phone, because this trend is about when a top functional performer or high professional gets thrust into a management role. That is, when people with a high level of specific expertise in their function or domain, you know, they're placed into leadership positions because they are really good singular subject matter experts.
Okay. So if I have understood correctly, this is when a high-performing technician, so an individual contributor, is recognized for his expertise and moved into management and being asked to lead people for the very first time with no or little training.
Yes, and it sounds like you've been coaching some people like this.
Yeah. It actually, yes.
Yep. Because organizations really want to promote their strong performers, and a lot of times those strong performers are technicians. They have to be in charge of others, but they find very quickly as a technician, they were ill prepared for the demands of a managerial role. And you can see that the data reflects that first-time managers are often without support. We found that 60% of the time, these accidental leaders never receive any training for their new role. So is it any surprise that 50% of the managers in organizations are rated as ineffective? You know, what training, you know, without this type of training, we kind of doom these leaders, you know, we set them up for failure. But then we add that accidental leaders are likely to be your organization's largest population of leaders. So their success or their struggles, they're going to have that ripple effect impacting people all across the organization. So we know that they became accidental leaders because they had strong expertise, and this gets them propelled into management role. But we've also found that age, background, and seniority don't really matter. You'll find accidental leaders of all ages and types. What they have in common is that their technical expertise does not compensate for their lack of leadership experience. And this rapid movement into management creates some problems. And accidental leaders are at risk, as you know, of career derailment.
Yeah, indeed, and this is my experience working with organizations and leaders all over the globe as well. I'd like Clemson to just make a point about derailment. So here at CCL, we talk about derailment when high potential employees are identified as being able to move up and take on more responsibility, but instead they go off track. So they either plateau below their expected level of achievement, or they reach higher levels but end up not doing well and getting demoted or fired.
Yeah, and accidental leaders are at really high risk of career derailment because they have weaknesses in the factors that we know contribute to derailment, such as struggling with interpersonal relationships or building teams or in one of the core competencies.
Yeah, indeed. But we also know, well, that there are some keys to success that organizations can use.
Yeah, it's those core four. Those four key competencies that we've identified you need to succeed in any leadership role. And, we call them the fundamental four, and they form the framework of what we call lead for success. And these four skills are what our research shows are the most important for effective leadership. And that's self-awareness, communication, influence, and learning agility.
Indeed. And so being strong in these four areas truly helps accidental leaders and contributes to their success. For example, we all know that a high level of self-awareness truly helps them becoming more aware of their unique strengths and also their areas of development. What is interesting is sometimes blind spots are just overused strengths. So there is all a world to be discovered and explored in there. Now, let's take a look at a couple of strategies organizations can use to support accidental leaders. What would you say about it, Clemson, based on your experience?
These strategies, this is just an overview. There's a lot more in the report, but companies, it's interesting that individuals play a role and companies play a role. And they each have a responsibility. Companies will want to help them develop and build these key competencies, growing their self-awareness and leveraging learning agility. The best way for these accidental leaders is sometimes through blended classes. They can't take time off to go to a full face-to-face class, but they can do a blended class and learn things that they can do online and apply right at work. And it's so much better if the leaders can integrate workplace examples into any type of learning and share their experiences with their peers. This just makes them so much stronger.
I fully agree, and I'd like to add coaching, mentoring, and peer support as well. And specifically, if I think about coaching, well, that can be extremely powerful because coaching can enable them somehow to flip their mindset. And so flip their mindset from it's about me mindset to it's not about me, it's about me and you, with you being the people they lead.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of coaching and mentoring are themes we're going to see throughout the next 6 trends. And as we go to trend number 2, I just want to, we saw in the chat where the 4 core competencies that are essential for leadership success are self-awareness, communication, influence, and learning agility. And learning agility is key for trend number 2.
Absolutely, it is. And thank you for highlighting that, Clemson. Absolutely. Trend number 2 is change endurance. And so it's really about the ability to build a more resilient workforce that can survive and thrive in the face of constant change. So change today is the new status quo. I'm sure I'm not saying, something that people have not experienced so far. So as we already mentioned, and not only is there technological change, digitalization, artificial intelligence, you name it, but also generational shifts. Really soon, iGen will be joining the workforce, and millennials are already in leadership positions. And also we need to mention new geopolitical and cultural shifts as well. So in the meantime, reality is that leaders can't stop from running operations, facing the market every day, making strategic decisions. And so maintaining a positive mindset in the face of all of these can be truly difficult.
And the change is constant. It's always coming at you. And although our panel said people don't like change, and over 60% of leaders told us they believe their organizations aren't prepared to handle change, we might argue that, people can change. And they change at different rates. And they really don't like change that isn't planned and when they're not informed or included.
Yeah, this is very true. So disruption is the new normal, and constant change is challenging.
Yeah, yet, adapting to change is essential to stay competitive. But, disruption is really upended a lot of industries.
Yeah, indeed, it has. But let's pause and reflect for a moment. As human beings, we can deal effectively with change when it is episodic or transitory. We can go through change successfully if we have time to recover. However, today, there is less and less recovering time. So what's increasing is pressure. So we are expected to adapt quickly to the changing needs of the business, of the customers, of the markets, of our managers. So more pressure, less recovering time, and if you're not prepared, well, pressure turns into rumination, which creates stress, and stress, sustained over time, well, it leads to burnout.
Yeah, but I think you're going to have to say a little bit more about rumination.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. I like to define rumination as a thinking pattern. So we ruminate when we get stuck in a loop of negative thoughts. Thoughts that are not focused in the present, but instead related to the past. And so we may think, if I only had, so regrets, or the future, and that would be what if, so we start worrying. And the very interesting thing is that this loop of negative thoughts becomes self-sustaining and hold us back from making decisions or taking action. All it does is to keep increasing our cortisol and adrenaline levels, paving the way to burnout. So self-awareness is key. So when we become aware of our rumination, we can make a choice. We can choose to break this pattern by refocusing our attention on something we can control and by putting things into perspective.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to those core four: self-awareness. And while we can all learn these skills individually, organizations, they need to improve the way they support their workforces in dealing with change.
Yes. They can build change endurance by applying the 3 C's of change. You see them on screen: communicate, collaborate, and commit. So communication, yes. We need to communicate the change, and we need to communicate often, sometimes more often than what we think. And also, we need to build collaboration by including people at all levels and listening to their concerns and perspectives so that they actively contribute to the process and develop ownership that leads to commitment.
That ownership is so important.
Oh, it is. It's essential. So these 3 elements, they feed each other, I would say. And also I'd like to add that organizations, they need to help their people by educating them about the importance of resilience and therefore of reducing stress by launching wellness campaigns and sharing tips on sleep, exercise, nutrition.
And, that idea about communication, collaboration, and commitment to helping workers outside the workplace is important as well. Leaders need to be role models. I mean, they have to set clear boundaries and follow the boundaries that they set. And they need to model these boundaries to their teams. Things like not sending late-night emails unless they're absolutely crucial. Or I know one organization that has restricted sending any emails on the weekends at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's so true. Because in a way, to be change resilient, we have to better understand our next trend and make sure that we manage our digital time with our people time.
Oh, yeah. And it's really interesting how these 2 trends overlap, because the next trend, this digital fluency idea, is really that double-edged sword. On one side, it makes us winners in the market. On the other, it cuts into our ability to be resilient in the face of constant change. Because digital fluency, it's all about ensuring that the leaders of today have the skills and perspectives that are needed for tomorrow.
Yeah, and the challenge with digital fluency is that there is often a generational skills gap. So our research has focused on three key leadership populations, and I found that so interesting: senior executives, digital natives, and virtual teams. They are all critical to success, but all may have different levels of digital fluency, let's face it. So at the same time, virtual teams are becoming more and more common. So globally, what we know is that the 85% of teams now collaborate virtually, and over 40% never meet in person. So this geographic dispersion of the workforce means we are all becoming more and more reliant on technological tools for collaboration, of course.
Oh, yeah. And the challenge is you've got a whole bunch of different populations that use the tools different ways. Is that how do we help different populations leverage technology available and become confident in it? You know, I'm not speaking for all senior executives, but I can say that our research shows they have significant management experience, but may not be as technically savvy as some of their as some of the digital millennials. And the digital natives are immersed in tech, but lack the leadership experience and skills to reach their full potential. So that's why organizations need to rethink the skills that are needed in this age of data and digital. You know, here's some ideas that companies use to be more proactive towards digital fluency, and these are just some that are in the report. The first is my favorite, and that's reverse mentoring. And quite honestly, I benefit from this every day. In the room next to ours, as a matter of fact, there's a colleague who is a digital native who helped me over the last 2 days navigate some really difficult technology for our new learning platform. And today, she and I are going to sit down and we're going to talk about how to forecast programs going forward. So I'm learning from her and she's learning from me. You know, and it's funny because same example, I can relate to virtual teams. She's in California, and she just happens to be in Greensboro today, but our other team members are in Spain and Shanghai. And we need to use technology a great deal, and we need to have the organizational training and support for that technology to make sure we're collaborating effectively.
Yeah. Indeed, and if I look at the screen, I'd like to mention something about the last one, which is about role modeling, really, yeah. So, you know, talking about senior leaders who avoid investing time and money into data and technology because they do not understand the benefits. Well, those people, they are losing money. Technology is the way of business today. So, you know, if you are not digitally fluent, if you're not equipping your teams with the tools they need, or if you're not growing your skills and those of your people, well, you are losing revenue and truly missing opportunities. Yeah. So that is why our fourth trend is about asking all leaders to embrace disruption. All leaders need to welcome innovation and change and develop their learning agility. And organizations, they need help. And and it comes back to the individual and organization. And just to clarify, when we say learning agility, we're talking about that essential leadership skill of being able to remain open to new ways of thinking and continually learn new things. We've long known that a high level of learning agility is a major predictor of success. So when companies can equip their people to welcome innovation, to embrace and even help create the new normal rather than just tolerate it, that's the key. But, you know, if you ask any leader, they're going to tell you innovation's important. You know, everybody says, innovation's important. Well, our research found that 94% of senior executives believe it is critical. But you got to look at the smaller data, and just 14% said their organizations were effective at it. So this is a real common problem. I mean, if you think about Kodak or Nokia or Sears, all of which it can be said they suffered from a lack of learning agility, and that led to their demise. Absolutely. And an organization today, in order to embrace, disruption, they need to develop new ways of thinking and new ways of doing. So this is what it is about. Well, at CCL, we talk about wrapped environments. So you can see that wrapped is embedded in the word disruption. You can see that. It's in capital letter on the title of the slide. So, and so exactly. So being able to, this is about really being able to deal effectively with complexity. And dealing effectively with complexity requires leaders to learn and develop in a new and a different way. So if you think about it, traditionally, leaders have learned through what we call horizontal development, which means accumulating more knowledge. And we know that very soon artificial intelligence will do most of the job. So what is now required is to develop vertically. And what that means, it means helping our leaders expand their thinking, ability, and mindset. So vertical development is about increasing our ability to think in a more systemic, strategic, and interdependent way. Vertical development helps people handle unpredictability and paradox more effectively. So it's more about how we think and deal with complexity than it is about what we know.
Yeah, I see you mentioned that term, heat experience. Say more about that, will you?
Yeah, absolutely. So a heat experience is something that disrupts habitual ways of thinking. So at work, for instance, it might be a developmental or challenging assignment like, turning a unit that's losing money into a profitable one, or turning an underperforming team into a high-performing one. So it is anything to get us thinking out of the ordinary.
And that's a real challenge for many of us. But once someone is thinking out of the box, how do we reward that type of thinking so the person continues to be comfortable with innovation?
Well, that's one of the strategies organizations can use to help their people embrace disruption. So, one of those, we like to say that you just have to point it out to them. And point is an easy tool to use when confronted with some new thinking. So leaders say they want innovative ideas. So they should try to avoid unintentionally sabotaging them by saying new ideas are not relevant, or stupid. Instead, point out different aspects of the idea. So P stands for praise or positives. O is for opportunities it creates. And the third letter, I, is for issue. So here is where you discuss some negative aspects of the idea. So finally, you want to praise them for their new thinking. So this keeps the innovation going. And it helps everyone understand that innovation is not limited to the R&D department, you see? So that's not reality anymore. Innovation can be at every level. So from the new employee to the CEO. You just mentioned, reverse mentoring before, just as one example among thousands. So, be real about your expectations and listen to theirs as well.
Oh, yeah, and it's interesting because just to reinforce that innovation is not a bottom down. It can be a top up. It can be a middle out. And your final point about high potentials and high professionals, like you say, it falls right back to accidental leadership. The report reveals that high potentials are usually pretty learning agile change makers and flexible problem solvers. And you want to give them that vertical development. You want to give them that opportunity for a heat experience to expand their mindset. And then you watch them flourish. Now, high professionals, those technical experts are awesome subject matter experts with fantastic expertise. They're going to need some additional support, that coaching and mentoring we talked about, if they move into management, become accidental leaders. So you can find even more strategies about disruption and innovation when you look into our full trends report.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to also say that the need to hear everyone is what our fifth trend is all about. Kicking glass is so relevant today. So successful organizations, they do create work environments that attract advance and retain women leaders, helping them, helping us break through that glass ceiling.
Yeah, I like the way you said helping us, because this is something that CCL is known for. It studies a great deal, and it's such an important trend right now, given everything that's in the news globally, culturally, the hashtag #MeToo movement. This is about us helping women leaders.
Absolutely, and there is an important conversation happening right now, as you said, around women's empowerment and what it looks like when organizations fully embrace equality.
And it's not just for women. Male leaders need to know that research has repeatedly found that recruiting and retaining women helps to improve financial performance, it increases job satisfaction, it boosts employee engagement. I love this. It even increases or decreases burnout for both genders. And yet, you look at the stats, and the data says that fewer S&P 1500 companies are led by women than by men named John.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So, when we look at the figures, that's it. There is so much we can do. So individual women, they do have to lean. We, as a woman, I like to say that. So we need to lean in and take ownership of our leadership and careers. But I'd like to say also that this is only half of the story. So organizations, they have to be ready to cultivate a climate of equality too. So they're playing an important critical role here, examining relic policies, looking for unconscious bias, and reinforcing work-life balance. Well, it helps all employees, not just women. And professional development opportunities are important to attract strong candidates. So ensure that there are clear support initiatives and learning and development opportunities to attract this critical talent and to retain it, reducing turnover costs. So in terms of strategies to help kick some glass as women, we need to be intentional about our careers. And organizations need to help rethinking systems and rethinking assumptions as well. Successful organizations attract and retain diverse talent by helping women build their networks and through developmental opportunities.
Yeah, that idea of women's leadership development initiatives, it measurably improves the lives of individual women, and also retaining some terrific female talent helps organizations thrive. And, it serves their employees, communities, and missions more effectively. So we've discussed developing talent that's ready for leadership, that's change resilient, digitally fluent, and how organizations can help kick some glass. What else can we do?
Well, we can help organizations reimagine their performance review systems. So the sixth trend is really about equipping supervisors, managers, and leaders to give better feedback. So future-thinking organizations understand that they need to improve performance management, which affects retention, employee engagement, and productivity by helping their people have better conversations.
Yeah, that better conversations is so important. A lot of people feel uncomfortable with performance reviews. I'm one of them, because giving and receiving feedback, it isn't easy. And, I kind of hate this, once a year conversation where you're going to provide all this information. Before CCL, I was with another organization. We would only do these once a year, and it was just dreaded. And it affected performance for the weeks before the conversation and even weeks after. So this quote is just so true.
Yeah. So we do need constant reviews and real-time data-based feedback. Almost a coaching culture that continuously enables employees to improve.
Yeah, that idea of continuous improvement is really important, because the idea of the traditional annual performance review, I mean, come on, that went out with carbon paper. We need coaching cultures, and I know that you teach this a lot in your courses, so you might define it for us a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely, Clemson. I'm so passionate about, and I'm meeting more and more organizations that actually are, joining this journey of developing a coaching culture. So, yeah, coaching cultures go beyond retroactive reviews and reap more benefits. So leaders are constantly engaged in what we call better conversations, challenging assumptions, limiting beliefs. These actually
Yep.
boost creativity and ownership at the same time. So it's so critical, and as well support. So managers, they provide ongoing data-based feedback. They enable talent to make adjustments when needed. They become more agile and effective. And even more important, because everyone gives feedback well, they become better at it, and therefore trust improves. So the entire organization becomes stronger.
Because we're engaged in a constant conversation about excellence and improving our ability at work. And our report talks about this, and what it reveals is it doesn't totally do away with performance reviews. We need to have them. But instead, let's create an ongoing coaching culture of constant and usable data-based feedback and insights, basically through candid conversations in the hallway every day. And it goes both bottom up and top down. And the key is delivering feedback in a way that maintains morale, decreases defensiveness, and increases, the effectiveness of an individual. And, it isn't as hard as some people might think. CCL has a well-known model for giving feedback called situation behavior impact that is based on data, where the specific situation is data. The clear behavior, not the perception of the behavior, is data, and the impact on the feedback giver, either larger impacts to their feeling, is also data.
Yeah, yes. And so today we know from neuroscience that feelings, emotions are the foundation of decision making. So they are data as well. You cannot tell someone they are not feeling something. So you can't counter argument on how a person feels about a situation, about a behavior that they have observed. So if someone is talking about how a behavior made them feel or the impact the behavior had on them, that feedback has tremendous credibility. And this sets up more effective conversations, especially when the feedback ratio overall remains at 4 positive comments for every 1 negative, which doesn't mean, as we said before, preparing 4 positive and 1 negative for the performance review twice a year, but instead have the ability of becoming a better human observer or, observer of human behavior and being able to, in a very concrete and factual way, giving positive and constructive feedback regularly, all time long.
Yeah, and as you were describing SBI in such clear terms just now, I understood SBI and feedback even better, and I feel more confident I can use that definition going forward.
Thank you for the feedback, Clemson. Really appreciate it. Thank you for role modeling that. So, as I think back on the 6 trends, I realized that in many ways, we have really been talking about creating a stronger leadership culture in an organization, and that's what this last trend is about. So CCL has done a lot of work in this area, and we know that a culture reboot can help accelerate organization transformation.
Yeah, this is where executives have to realize that rolling out a new vision requires more than just hanging posters on the walls. They need to find innovative ways to create a shared sense of ownership across an organization.
Yes, but let's face it, a culture reboot is not easy. And in fact, 62% of organizations say it's the most difficult type of organizational change to manage. So strong organizations can use their internal ecosystems to adjust to the external environment. And culture is the lifeblood of an organization. So when an organization combines, a strong leadership culture with a strong business strategy, well, it can be just unstoppable.
Yeah, and that combination, though, isn't easy to achieve because culture is deeply embedded. I mean, we all know the saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast because every organization has a culture, whether you like it or not. And the question is it the culture you want and need? Culture change requires an intentional effort. A strong leadership culture can be the ultimate lever for organizational transformation, but it's not going to be without careful preparation and execution. Culture change needs to be planned.
Yeah, and in terms of strategies to accomplish this, the planning does not have to be that hard, actually, but it needs to be done. So, organizations who want to transform their culture must ensure that leaders they have can effectively link leadership culture and strategy. So, the transformation effort is not entirely subjective. It involves a great deal of data to locate gaps in the culture, and then, we need to look at how to effectively bridge those gaps.
And even more important, this type of intentional culture change is not top-down. It is top-supported, but believe it or not, most culture change happens bottom-up and is middle-supported. You have to engage the entire organization to make the change.
Yes, and when that happens, there is a clear difference in the workplace. Your organization is going to be more effective and efficient.
Absolutely. And, leading an organization today with as much disruption as there is, the old ways of doing business and grooming leaders, they really no longer apply. Organizations need agile, digitally savvy leaders who are strong in those fundamental 4 competencies that will enable you to lead for success.
Absolutely, and that's why organizations are now tailoring programs to support their accidental leaders and building workforces that are more resilient, learning agile, and digitally fluent with the ability to embrace disruption.
Absolutely, and they're also recognizing that inclusiveness is an imperative. So they're working to attract and retain more women leaders and are reimagining reviews by equipping their people to give feedback more consistently and well and constantly. Many of them are considering whether what they really need is a cultural reboot and organizational transformation. So those are the 7 trends that we've identified. And there are also 7 things that the most forward-thinking senior executives globally are thinking about today, as we said earlier, irrespective of type of organization. And it's how they are going to reimagine their talent and leadership development for tomorrow.
Yes, Clemson. And, if some of the trends we have shared today resonate with you, so with all of you being, so kind to attend this webinar today, so if you have questions or concerns about how they relate to your organization, we want you to know that CCL is ready to help.
Yeah, that's right. We can help you discover how these 7 emerging trends and imperatives will affect you and your business in the future. We really enjoy, advising organizations, identifying what investments an organization might need to make, and having that deeper conversation about how both horizontal and vertical leadership development can help your organization and can help your leaders inside the organization. We enjoy helping develop leaders at all levels, from first-time managers who are accidental leaders, my favorite, to senior executives, my other favorite, and everyone in between.
Yes. So, with that said, we truly want to encourage you, all of you, to download the full report if you haven't already, so that you can get more information on the 7 trends. But not only, you will also find really relevant information about the strategies that you can use to respond to those trends and challenges, and additional research and resources from CCL as well.
Yeah, there's an awful lot more in the report than we went over today. We just wanted to give you a quick insight to these 7 trends, some ideas that you might be able to do. And I've been watching the chat, and we've got some very exciting questions on there. And so now we're going to switch over to a little Q&A.
Great. One of the first comments was from Rebecca. She wondered about any recommended resources for rumination versus resilience. Monica, do you have some suggestions for that?
Absolutely. I think, well, my first suggestion would be there is a wonderful book that our colleague Nick Petrie has been, writing on this subject, on the subject of rumination, together with an expert that has been spending most of his life researching the subject. So we can make available the title, maybe through the chat, of the book in a moment. And
Great.
There you will find plenty of information about the research behind and, all the strategies that also can be used to overcome rumination.
Thank you.
Yeah, and believe it or not, there's also an assessment out there called the Change Challenge that you might want to identify that talks about what Nick has in his book and about understanding your cycle of rumination and breaking that cycle of rumination.
Yes, absolutely. And this would be an assessment that's been developed by the same expert that has been working with Nick. Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. We have from artists saying digital is broad. Do you have any clear examples?
Oh, my goodness. Yes. So it's interesting because when we talk about digital fluency, in some ways, what we're talking about is being comfortable with using, with leveraging technology and leading others in the ability to leverage that technology. So instead of flying somewhere, becoming more comfortable with things like this, with things like webinars, instead of putting things on paper, how do we use a shared working space through some type of technology to work on the same document together and be comfortable with that? So in some cases, it's leading that idea of comfort around technology. And Monica, any thoughts about that?
I agree with you. It's a large concept, digital and digitalization, and I think, as you know, any of those concepts has to be contextualized to the organizational culture, challenges, the market they're facing, and also, bringing back the notion of learning agility on how to best adapt and learn in these kind of situations.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, because what we do in many of our programs is we try to bring the different generations or virtual teams together to learn from each other and leverage their individual skills around technology, put them to use for the company. So digital is a broad term, and it is related across technology, but it's how do we leverage technology as leaders for the betterment of our individuals and our organization.
Absolutely, and I would say we need to leverage technology, and at the same we need to manage it, as we said before. So it's a polarity. It's a very interesting and fascinating polarity to manage, in a way.
And if they want to know more, we've got a number of white papers on future fluency, talking about playing the digital transformation game, basically getting people involved in digital transformation. And we've got one specific to Europe on how European leaders are adapting to the digital age. So that's just some references you might use to go deeper into that topic. Okay.
From Rebecca, she would love any thoughts and resources on innovative reviews look like in RUPT environment. When the environment is constantly changing, what strategies can be utilized for meaningful goal setting without the feeling of moving targets?
I want to thank Rebecca for some great questions. Wow, that's awesome. Man, I'm looking at Monica. You want to take this one?
So, It's interesting because the focus, Rebecca, that we are taking, instead of going into the process of defining goals to be, evaluated and assessed, is more to help organizations developing a culture where people spontaneously but effectively at the same time would be able to give feedback. But it's not only about giving feedback in a more effective way, it's also about having effective and better conversation about what's happening in the moment. And I think more and more organizations are moving in this direction. So creating loops, continuous loops of conversations, of feedback conversation, performing conversations, and beyond that. So it's a fine balance between improving your performance, but also at the same time boosting ownership, creativity, innovation, and by doing that with a mix of coaching techniques and effective feedback, people learn how to think differently. And so ultimately, we are helping them accelerating their vertical development. So when organization owns this process and it requires a number of initiatives happening in parallel across the organization, really, we can see a clear difference in the performance of the organization overall.
Oh yeah, and when we have these conversations, we do want to kind of anchor them somewhere and have kind of a what are we really talking about? And one of the challenges in a rough environment are things moving so quickly. So if you're working in agile management, you're following some type of Scrum process, and there's many things happening. There's actually 4 constants that you could work with your team on, and that's talking about we've got all these things going on, but let's talk about your learning agility. Let's talk about how you communicate. Let's talk about how you collaborate with others. Let's talk about your self-awareness. So you can talk about those core 4 competencies as all of that disruption is going on and make them more effective inside that disruptive world. So just as you're thinking about, boy, I don't know how to set a market goal for a direct report, you might want to set a learning agility goal or a communication goal or an influence goal or one focused on self-awareness, and then work with them as they build that competency. It's just another way to think about how we lead our teams.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
From Claire, can you explain more about how culture change happens from the bottom up?
Oh, yeah, this is one of my favorites. Okay, I'm looking at the time. Now, it's really interesting that because, let's go back to digital transformation. A lot of the digital transformation and new ideas happen from the bottom up because of our digital natives and their ability to rapidly integrate technology into the workplace. That's an example of how something might happen from the bottom up. As a personal example, I have 2 sons. They're in their mid-20s, and I talk to them, a couple of times a week, and I'm asking them, what's the latest app? What's the latest program I should be in? What's really cool about how we do business? And in that way, I introduce those apps and those programs into what we do here at the center. And that's an idea of digital transformation and culture change that's happening from the bottom up. The key there goes back to what Monica brought up earlier, and that is the senior leadership that may or may not be comfortable with that type of digital change. They have to be willing to point it out. They got to express the positives. They got to talk about the opportunities of getting that new technology in there. Then they might bring in some issues, maybe a firewall issue or something like that, but then really reward people for their new thinking and how they're thinking about leveraging technology in the company. But Monica, what are your thoughts?
I'm in line with you, Clemson. I think all you said is absolutely true. So it's about helping the organization becoming more and more aware of all the changes and shifts that are becoming more and more apparent across the system. And so how to integrate the data and how to anticipate the needs is also helping organizations making the cultural shift from bottom up. So yeah, definitely. So I would say this is one of an additional possibilities to be taken into account. And I'm mindful of time, so I want to make sure we have maybe one or two questions more addressed.
One question from Mauricio. How do these trends correlate cross-culturally?
So one more time?
How do these trends correlate cross-culturally?
So our experience and research says that basically these 7 trends are hitting business globally. My experience from being a global traveler and doing programs literally all over the world. I was in EMEA last week. I was in China last month, work in the GCC or Mideast region a great deal, is everyone is facing these 7 trends, but at different levels of immediacy and urgency, depending on their industry and depending on their organization. So when we talk to organizations, we might ask them which of these 7 trends is most difficult for them right now, and what do they see in the future. But that's one way that they correlate globally, but I want to get Monica's thoughts as well.
Yeah, and when you were talking about culture, absolutely, there is a cultural element in terms of geographies, and then there is a cultural element in terms of organization. And so to your point, organization, depending on the industry they belong to, the market they are, expanding or established, well, they may face some trends more than others. So what's important, again, is to be able to contextualize, but somehow we do, by working with our clients, we realize that all these 7 trends are present as, challenges and opportunities that organizations are facing today as we become more and more interdependent somehow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. I think we're getting around to the end of our time here today. I just wanted to let you know that in addition to sending you a link to the recording of today's webinar so that you can view and listen to it again, we will also include links to various resources that you've inquired about the webinar today. That'll be included in our follow-up email that will have resources and articles, information about RUPT, R-U-P-T, and resilience that you've inquired about. We will also include that information.
And the assessment,
And the challenge assessment. Great. We will do that, and we'll send that webinar out to you tomorrow. Again, we want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Monica and Clemson, for sharing the 7 emerging trends and reshaping leadership development and specific strategies to respond to each trend. This will conclude the webinar for today, and be out on the lookout again for that follow-up email, which will link to the webinar and the trends report and of additional resources. We hope that you'll be able to join us for a future webinar. And as you exit the webinar, we ask that you take a moment to complete the evaluation so that we continue to make these events well worth your time. Anyone who completes the evaluation will also be entered into a drawing for the Leading Continuous Change book. And you can also request that a CCL team member follow up with you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, Monica.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Clemson.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This actually concludes today's webcast. Thank you all for attending. We will send all registrants an email tomorrow with the link to the recording. And please visit our event calendar to sign up for future webcasts.